I was sitting in my living room 3 months ago when I finally realized the truth. 3 months ago, not 5 years ago when it started, not 2 years in when I should have caught it, not even last year when things got really bad, but 3 months ago, when I was looking through old bank statements, scrolling through 5 years of transactions. That's when it hit me like a freight train. My brother-in-law didn't just borrow money from me. He didn't make a mistake. He didn't accidentally exploit me because he was going through a rough patch. He systematically, methodically, and intentionally preyed on me because he knew I wouldn't fight back. He knew that because I'm disabled, because I have mobility issues, because I rely on people to help me with certain things, I would be too afraid, too ashamed, or too trusting to say no. And honestly, he was right. For 5 years, he was right. I grew up in a close-knit family. We're the type of family that does everything together. We help each other. We show up. We're there when things get tough. My brother-in-law married into this family about 7 years ago, and he seemed like a genuinely good guy. He was funny, he was friendly, and most importantly, he was always willing to help me out. When I needed someone to drive me to appointments, he'd do it. When I needed help with errands, he'd make the time. I thought I had found someone I could trust completely. I thought he saw past my disability and just saw me as family. I was so incredibly wrong. It started small, really small. He asked me for $200 to cover a car repair. He said he was short on cash that week and would pay me back the following Friday. I didn't even hesitate. I pulled out my checkbook and wrote it out without a second thought. That Friday came and went. No payment. I brought it up casually, and he said something came up, but he'd definitely have it the next week. The next week turned into the next month. The next month turned into never. But here's the thing about asking someone for money. They owe you when you're disabled and that person is family. It's complicated. You start wondering if you're being difficult. You start questioning whether you're the one overreacting. You start feeling guilty for even bringing it up. That's exactly what he counted on. So I let it go. And once I let that first debt go, everything else became possible. It became acceptable in his mind. It became the precedent. If I could forgive $200 without making a fuss, what about 500? What about 2,000? What about asking me to co-sign a loan? What about having me put my name on documents I didn't fully understand? What about slowly, quietly, methodically draining my savings while I was too trusting, too disabled, and too afraid to do anything about it? Before we continue, I need to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments right now. Are you from New York, California, Texas? Maybe you're watching from somewhere totally different. I want to know. Comment your city below and let me know you're here, you're listening, and you're part of this community. And if this story is hitting you, if you're going through something similar, or you know someone who is, please hit that subscribe button. Subscribe to Invisible Abuse. We're sharing more stories just like this one, and I promise you, your story matters too. You're not alone in this. Subscribe, comment your city, and let's build this together. Let's break the silence. Thank you for being here. So there I was, having already let $200 go without a fight. I told myself it was fine. He'd pay me back eventually. Or maybe he just needed a little more time. Family takes care of family, right? That's what I kept telling myself. But you know what they say about patents? They don't start with a bang. They start with a whisper. They start with you making one compromise, and then another, and then another. Until one day you look up and you don't even recognize your own life anymore. That's exactly what happened to me. That about 3 months after the first $200, my brother-in-law showed up at my door. He had this look on his face like he was about to ask me something really important. He sat down across from me, and he said he needed help with something bigger. He said his credit was bad, really bad, and he needed someone with good credit to co-sign a car loan. Now, at this point in time, I still hadn't seen that $200. I brought it up casually, like I wasn't even really thinking about it. He waved it off. He said of course he'd pay me back, but first, would I just help him with this loan? He needed the car for work. It was temporary, just for a few months until his credit improved, and then we'd switch everything over to his name. I should have said no. I absolutely should have said no. But here's the thing about being disabled and having someone in your family offer to help you all the time. It creates this weird dynamic where you feel like you owe them something. You feel like you have to repay their kindness with your own. You feel like if you say no to them, they might stop helping you with the things you actually need. That's manipulation. but I didn't see it as manipulation at the time. I saw it as family obligation. I saw it as the price of having someone I could rely on. So, I signed the papers. I co-signed that car loan without fully understanding what it meant, without reading all the fine print, without asking enough questions. That car loan was only the beginning. Once I proved I was willing to put my name on something, once I showed him I would prioritize his needs over my own financial security, everything changed. He started asking for bigger things. He asked if he could use my address for a business loan. He asked if I could write a personal check for $10,000 that he promised he'd pay back within 6 months. He had a business opportunity that was going to be huge. He asked if I'd let him manage my bank account because he said I was spending too much money, and he wanted to help me budget better. I said yes to some of these things. I said no to others, but the no's became fewer and fewer, and the yeses became bigger and bigger. What I didn't realize was that he was testing me. He was seeing how far he could push before I pushed back, and every single time I didn't push back hard enough, every single time I made an excuse for his behavior or minimized what was happening, I was giving him permission to go further. I was showing him that I was an easy target. I was showing him that my disability made me a vulnerable mark. And the worst part, some of this was happening right in front of my family, and they didn't even see it. Or maybe they saw it and didn't want to get involved. Either way, I was alone in this, and he knew it. By year 2, I had co-signed multiple loans. I had given him tens of thousands of dollars in cash. I had let him put me on bank accounts that he was slowly draining. I had signed documents I didn't fully understand. And the $200, I'd completely stopped asking about that. It seemed so small compared to everything else that was happening. I was in so deep that I couldn't even see how deep I was anymore. I was functioning on a level of cognitive dissonance that would make a therapist's head spin. Part of me knew something was wrong. Part of me was in complete denial. And part of me, the part that was ashamed and scared, was just trying to survive day to day without acknowledging any of it. He would tell me that the money was temporary. He would say that his business was about to take off, and he'd pay me back everything and more. He would tell me that I was helping him when he needed it most, and that real family doesn't keep score. He would remind me of every single time he'd driven me to an appointment or helped me with something. He weaponized his previous kindness against me. He made me feel guilty for even thinking about my own financial security. And I bought it. I completely bought it. Because I wanted to believe him. Because I needed to believe him. Because admitting the truth would mean admitting that I had made a catastrophic mistake in trusting him. By the time we hit year 3, the exploitation had become so normalized that it didn't even feel like exploitation anymore. It felt like just how things were. It felt like the new normal. He would text me asking for money, and I'd transfer it without question. He would need me to sign something, and I'd sign it. He would ask me to do something financially that benefited him, and I'd do it. It was like I was operating on autopilot, like my brain had decided that this was just what my life was now, and there was no point in fighting against it. What made it even more invisible was that nobody outside of our immediate circle really knew what was happening. To the rest of the world, he was still the helpful brother, and he was still the guy who drove me places and made sure I was okay. He was still the family member everyone thought was so generous and kind. Nobody saw the other side of it. Nobody saw the spreadsheet in his mind, where he was calculating exactly how much he could take from me before I became completely useless to him. Nobody saw the predatory nature of what he was doing because it was all happening in the margins, in the spaces between family gatherings, in the private moments when he was asking me for things and I was too ashamed to tell anyone. The insidious part about this kind of exploitation is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a warning label. It doesn't start with someone tying you up and locking you in a basement. It starts with someone you trust asking you for help. It starts with someone who has proven they care about you, asking you to prove that you care about them back. It starts so subtly that by the time you realize what's happening, you're already in so deep that you don't even know how to get out. I was also starting to feel the physical and mental toll of all this stress. I was having trouble sleeping. I was losing weight. I was anxious all the time. I was constantly checking my bank account, watching the numbers go down, and feeling absolutely powerless to stop it. I started isolating myself because I didn't want anyone to know what was happening. I didn't want my family to look at me like I was stupid or weak. I didn't want to admit that I had made terrible financial decisions. I didn't want to face the reality that someone I had trusted, someone who was supposed to help me because of my disability, had turned my vulnerability into his personal ATM machine. and the thing that kept me trapped was shame. Pure, unadulterated shame. I felt ashamed for being so trusting. I felt ashamed for not catching it sooner. I felt ashamed that I had allowed my disability to make me an easy target. I felt ashamed that I was too weak to stand up for myself. I felt ashamed that I had made these financial commitments that I couldn't get out of. Shame is one of the most powerful weapons in an abuser's arsenal because it keeps the victim quiet. It keeps them from reaching out for help. It keeps them isolated and powerless. And he knew that. He absolutely knew that by year 4, I had lost count of how much money had gone missing. I had lost count of how many loans I had co-signed. I had lost count of how many documents had my name on them. The numbers were so big that they didn't even feel real anymore. $50,000, $100,000. I genuinely couldn't tell you anymore. All I knew was that my savings were gone. My credit was starting to take hits from loans he wasn't paying. And I was in a hole that I didn't know how to climb out of. And he was still asking for more. He was still showing up at my door with another business opportunity, another loan, another financial emergency that only I could solve. The worst part was realizing that nobody around me had noticed. My family thought everything was fine. My friends had no idea what was going on. The professionals I worked with didn't know that I was being systematically drained of my resources. I was living a complete double life. On the surface, I was fine. I was functioning. I was going to appointments and maintaining my life, but underneath, I was drowning. I was suffocating under the weight of financial exploitation that felt like it would never end, and the person doing it to me was still being welcomed at family dinners like a hero. I don't know if there's a specific moment when you suddenly wake up to something you've been ignoring. For me, it wasn't just one thing. It was a series of small moments that started to add up until the picture became too clear to deny anymore. It started with a phone call. I got a call from a collections agency asking about a debt in my name, a credit card I didn't open, a card that my brother-in-law had apparently opened in my name without my permission and maxed out. That was the first real domino to fall. I was confused at first. I thought it was a mistake. I thought someone had stolen my identity. But then I started digging, and I started asking questions, and things started to unravel very quickly. He had opened this credit card in my name at some point during all of this. He had used it to charge probably $15,000 worth of stuff on it. And he hadn't told me. He hadn't asked permission. He had just done it because he knew I wouldn't find out about it immediately. And by the time I did, he'd figure out how to deal with it. That phone call was like someone turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, I could see all the things I had been deliberately not looking at. I could see the pattern. I could see the manipulation. I could see the calculated nature of everything he had done. This wasn't a series of mistakes. This wasn't a family member going through a rough patch and making poor decisions. This was someone who had deliberately targeted me, exploited my vulnerability, used my disability against me, and systematically taken advantage of my trust and my willingness to help. I started going through my finances with a level of intensity that I hadn't allowed myself to before. I went through years of bank statements. I looked at every check I had written. I looked at every transfer I had made. I looked at every co-signed loan, and I tallied it all up. By the time I was done, I had a number that made me feel sick. I had given this man, this family member, this person I had trusted with my vulnerability, over $50,000, $50,000 that I will likely never see again, $50,000 that came from my disability payments, from my careful budgeting, from me doing everything right and still struggling to make ends meet. When I finally added it all up 3 months ago, I didn't even cry at first. I just sat there in shock. I sat there trying to process how I had let this happen. I sat there trying to understand how someone who claimed to care about me, someone who had positioned himself as my helper and my protector, could do something like this. How could he look me in the eye at family dinners knowing what he was doing? How could he hug me and act like we had a genuine relationship when he was actively stealing from me? How could he sleep at night? But then, the realization set in. He probably slept just fine. Because, to him, I wasn't a person. I was a resource. I was an opportunity. I was a vulnerable woman with a disability who was easy to manipulate and easy to exploit. The fact that I was family meant nothing to him. The fact that I had trusted him meant nothing to him. The fact that I had opened my home and my heart to him meant absolutely nothing. He saw one thing and one thing only: a mark. That's when the anger started. That's when the shame started to transform into something else. That's when I started to understand that this wasn't my fault. This wasn't something I had done to myself. This wasn't a result of me being too trusting or too naive or too disabled to handle my own finances. This was a deliberate, calculated act of predation. And I was done being silent about it. Once I realized the full scope of what had happened, I had to make a choice. I could stay silent. I could pretend I didn't know. I could let it go and try to move on with my life. Or I could say something. I could confront him. I could tell my family. I could potentially take legal action. The smart part of my brain knew that saying something was going to cause chaos. It was going to blow up my family. It was going to create conflict and drama and pain. But the part of me that had been silenced for 5 years was screaming to be heard. I decided to confront him first. I called him up and I told him exactly what I had discovered. I told him about the credit card. I told him about the loans. I told him about every penny I had counted. I told him that I knew he had been deliberately exploiting me. And you know what he did? He denied it. He lied to my face. He tried to gaslight me into thinking that I was confused or misremembering things. He tried to make me feel like I was the one who had made a mistake. He tried to convince me that everything he had done was justified because he had helped me so much over the years. When gaslighting didn't work, he got angry. He accused me of being ungrateful. He said I was betraying him. He said I was making a big deal out of nothing. He said that real family doesn't keep track of money like this. He used every manipulation tactic in the book to try to get me to back down. But this time, I didn't back down. This time, I stood firm. This time, I said no. When I told my family what had happened, the reaction was mixed. Some of them believed me immediately. Some of them were sympathetic, but others defended him. Others made excuses for him. Others suggested that maybe it was a miscommunication, or that I should just let it go and move forward. It was incredibly painful to realize that my own family was more interested in keeping the peace than in supporting me. It was painful to realize that some of them valued their relationship with him more than they valued justice for me. I ended up filing a police report. I consulted with a lawyer about potential civil action. I got my credit frozen to prevent any further fraud. I cut off all contact with my brother-in-law, and I started the long, painful process of trying to rebuild my financial life. The legal process was slow and frustrating. It's still ongoing, actually, and the truth is, I'll probably never recover all of that money. But what I gained was something more valuable than money. I gained my voice back. I gained clarity. I gained the understanding that what happened to me was not okay, and it was not my fault. I'm telling you my story not because I want your pity. I'm not here to make you feel sorry for me, or to be the victim in some tragic narrative. I'm telling you my story because I need you to understand something really important. If you're disabled, if you're vulnerable in any way, if you rely on other people to help you with certain things, you are at risk. You are at risk of exploitation by people who are supposed to care about you. You are at risk of having your trust weaponized against you. You are at risk of becoming a target. And I need you to know that if this is happening to you, if someone is exploiting you, if someone is using your disability against you, it is not your fault. You are not stupid. You are not naive. You are not weak. You are the victim of someone else's predatory behavior, and you deserve support. You deserve justice. You deserve to be heard. I also want to say something to the people who are watching this, and you know someone this is happening to. Please say something. Please don't look the other way. Please don't make excuses for the abuser. Please don't prioritize family harmony over someone's safety and security. When you stay silent, you become complicit. When you make excuses, you enable the behavior. When you protect the abuser instead of the victim, you're sending a message that this behavior is acceptable. And it's not. The invisible abuse that happens to people with disabilities is real. It's systemic. It's pervasive. It's happening in families all across this country right now. And we need to talk about it. We need to bring it into the light. We need to stop pretending it doesn't exist just because it's not visibly violent. Just because there are no bruises doesn't mean there's no abuse. Just because it's financial instead of physical doesn't make it any less damaging. If you're going through something like this right now, please reach out. Please talk to someone you trust. Please contact a lawyer or a financial advisor or a social worker or a counselor. Please don't suffer in silence the way I did. Please don't let shame keep you trapped. Please don't let guilt prevent you from protecting yourself. Your safety and your security matter. Your dignity matters. Your life matters. This is why I started Invisible Abuse. This is why I'm sharing my story. This is why I want to hear your story. Because together, we can break this cycle. Together, we can raise awareness. Together, we can make it harder for predators to hide in the shadows of family obligation and disability vulnerability. Together, we can create a world where people with disabilities are protected instead of exploited, where we are seen as valuable instead of vulnerable, where our voices matter. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. And thank you for understanding that what happens in the invisible spaces, the spaces where society isn't looking, matters just as much as what happens in plain sight. Your story matters, and I'm here to listen. Before you go, I need you to do something for me. I need you to share this video. Not just watch it and move on. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with a friend. Share it with a family member. Share it with someone you know who might be going through something similar. Because visibility is everything. Silence is what keeps these predators in power. Silence is what keeps victims trapped. But when we talk about it, when we bring it into the light, everything changes. If you're struggling with something like this right now, please know that you're not alone. There are resources available to you. There are people who can help. Reach out to a local disability advocacy organization. Call the National Elder Fraud Hotline. Speak to a financial advisor or a therapist. Do not stay silent. Do not suffer alone. Subscribe to Invisible Abuse. We're going to keep telling these stories. We're going to keep amplifying these voices. We're going to keep fighting for people with disabilities who are being exploited and abused in the invisible spaces of society. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And we are here to listen. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of this movement toward justice and awareness. I'll see you in the next video. Keep fighting.